Hi folks, this is Jay. Hope you're okay today and love to everybody. I'm just going to give three arguments of why there's evidence for the Christian faith being true. Now, there are many arguments that I can make, but what I'm making today is the advance of the early church as evidence for the truth of Christianity. So, if you want to look at a source for this, it's J.P. Holding. Go and have a look at his articles on early Christianity. Or his article on impossible faith is a really good article. So I want to just share with you three arguments why Christianity is true. I'm going to do one here and two more videos. First of all, the preaching of the cross. For Christ sent me not to baptize but to preach the gospel, not with wisdom of words, lest the cross of Christ should be made of none effect. Okay. So Paul went around preaching the cross of Christ. Now, in the time of Paul and the early church, crucifixion was seen as the most horrible, disgusting thing that could happen to a person. And if you were crucified, it kind of destroys your reputation in the Roman Empire. Josephus and other ancient writers talk about the gruesomeness of crucifixion. So if you're going to start a new religion, it would be the last thing that you would do, preach the crucifixion as the centre of your faith. It's kind of like someone today saying, oh, our prophet was a paedophile. You know, that's the kind of disdain someone who was crucified was seen in their culture. It was really, you're just out of it. You're just the scum of the scum. And you wouldn't go around saying, oh, our prophet's a paedophile, our prophet's a paedophile, come to know him. You wouldn't do it. So why did the early church go around preaching Jesus was crucified? It was not a selling point. It would have been massive barrier put up against the Christian faith when they were preaching the crucifixion. And yet, Paul said, we preach Christ crucified. So that is evidence that the Christian faith is true. The fact that it advanced and within 300 years took over the Roman Empire on such a handicap as a message that was not worth selling in the ancient world is evidence. What do you think? Now, we're looking at the early church and we're looking at evidence for Christianity, and that the early church is evidence for the Christianity as well. The advance of the early church is evidence that Christianity is the truth. Secondly, how do you account for the fact that the early church based its foundation on women? It was the women that saw Jesus first, resurrected, and that is in the Gospels. So, for the first 100 years, the women were the central plank in the apologetic of the Christian faith. In other words, the skeptics would have looked at the Gospels and they would have seen women at the centre. Now, this was a handicap in the time. A woman's witness in court from Jewish culture was only worth half of a man. That generally women were not respected in ancient culture. There are feminist scholars that have done articles and tried to piece all information from Greece and Egypt and all the rest about women that did have respect in their ancient cultures and whatever. But if you did a first study of the ancient world, women did not have the same kudos as men. And so you were not going to advance your religion if you put women at the centre of your faith, evidentially. And yet, the early church did that. It was a massive handicap to do that, and yet the Christian faith advanced and took the Roman Empire within 300 years. You cannot explain that on a naturalistic perspective. Thank you for listening and take care. And we're looking at evidence for the early church, for Christianity through the early church, the advance of the early church, and I'll finish now on the issue of class. It is generally thought by many people today that Christianity advanced with the poor people, and that's why it advanced, because they were ignorant and they didn't know better. But what they don't realize, that they don't understand the full implication of Christianity in the context of ancient Rome and the Roman culture in the 1st century AD. For example, it would not have been an advantage for a slave to become a Christian, because Christianity clearly states that you're just to get on with it. They were saying that you undermine your slave master by showing love. That is something that would not have been attractive to the slaves. The slaves just wanted to be free. So many slaves became Christians. Next problem is Christianity didn't just spread en masse to the slaves, it actually spread right throughout the hierarchy of the Roman Empire, through all the classes, especially the middle class and the upper class. And so therefore, if you're a middle class person or someone of general wealth and status, becoming a Christian in early first century Rome was not a good thing to do. You would have lost all your status, you would have lost a lot of power in your culture for doing that. And yet Christianity advanced in a powerful way. How do you explain that? It advanced in all classes, and it would have been a deterrent to them. It would have been bringing them down in their culture to do that, yet they still believed and trusted in God. So we're going into our final argument on evidence for Christianity through the advance of the early church. We've looked at number one, the preaching of the cross was not a good selling point to do with your Steiner religion. Number two, putting women at the centre is not a selling point for your religion in the first century. Number three, it's not a selling point for each structure of classes, middle class, working class, upper class, whatever. It was not a selling point, yet Christianity advanced. And then finally, it was dangerous to be a Christian. You would probably lose your life in the ancient world. That's what happened. There were many persecutions of Christians. Many Christians had their livelihood taken. Many of them were tortured. Many of them were killed. And this happened generation after generation after generation. And yet within 300 years of the most horrific persecutions you could ever imagine, systematic persecutions throughout the ancient world, Christianity took over the Roman Empire. How do you explain that? Thank you for listening, and God bless you.